In the next clip, you can see and hear the officer who shot the teen chasing him down the alley. Video showing Adam stopping near a fence includes a grainy, magnified freeze frame. CPD used a red arrow to highlight what appears to be a gun in the teen's right hand.
Hey, show me your head.
When Adam moves his right hand toward the officer fires one shot. The teen falls to the ground.
Talk a little bit about a video you may have seen out of Chicago, and there's a lot of controversy surrounding it. A young kid, Adam Toledo, I believe he was 13 years old, was recently shot and killed by a police officer, and I think the usual suspects on both sides are kind of retreating back to their corners. You have the pro-police people saying, this was 100% justified, and then you have kind of the other crowd, the defund police, I would say, but also the criminal justice reform people saying, this was not justified. This kid should not have been shot. So I think I want to start by letting y'all take a look at the video and see what happens, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit.
Nearby church showing the teen walking down the street with a male adult. It happened around 2:30 a.m. during the early morning hours of March 29th in the city's Little Village neighborhood. Another surveillance camera from nearby school captures what appears to be the man Adam was with firing off at least 8 rounds from a gun. A red arrow points to the duo. In the next clip, you can see and hear the officer who shot the teen chasing him down the alley. Video showing Adam stopping near a fence includes a grainy, magnified freeze frame. CPD used a red arrow to highlight what appears to be a gun in the teen's right hand.
Hey, show me your head.
When Adam moves his right hand toward the officer fires one shot. The teen falls to the ground. Stills of the scene include a recovered handgun. Police.
So I want to gauge both of you guys' thoughts on this. So police have released this video. It appears to show, just kind of summing up what they said in the video, the young kid had a gun at one point. It appears, just from what we can tell, that he threw the gun away while the police were chasing him, and that when they said stop, drop the gun, he moved forward as if to raise his hands and did not have the gun on him at that point, and then at that point he was shot. So I guess, what do y'all think? I'll start with you, Cameron. Justified or not?
I think it's kind of tough to tell at this point. You're given a couple of video clips. I think once we kind of get more context when the case kind of goes on, I think we'll probably get a clearer picture. Just for starters, like, my very early opinion is probably going to go on the side of not justified, mostly because we've kind of seen instances where more recently where police officers have maybe been too hasty in their decision making with certain things, and especially if you mention something, I might get this wrong here, about him throwing the firearm and he was kind of already kind of putting his hands up. I would kind of like to hear a little bit more about that moment in particular, and then I think I would probably be able to make a clear judgment on this specific instance then.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Cameron. Context is always very key. In this instance, it is also important to note, this is not something that was isolated, right? This is part of a scenario where police had responded to shots fired. There have been reports that this kid had some affiliation with gang activity. So obviously, he seems like I feel sorry for him any way you cut it, as does, the police union chief. The police union leader went on TV and he said, look, I feel sorry for this poor kid, but the officer's actions were justified. So that's one side of it. And then on the other side, you have people saying, well, he did what the officer told him, right? He may not have been in the right to be involved in whatever activity he was in beforehand, but he dropped the gun and raised his hands. And if you do that, then you don't deserve to die. So.
Yeah, it's hard for me to ascribe any sort of justification to this because like you said, we need more context. From what I've seen, it almost feels like justified is too strong of a word. It's almost sort of like, listen, if I were in that police officer's shoes, now obviously the police officer should have been like fully trained. You don't just become a cop.
I believe he had there are reports that he had military background.
Okay.
So he probably did have the training.
So, again, so obviously I don't have any of that.
Right.
But if I had been in a similar situation, you see the report, and I can't verify it because obviously I wasn't there, but you see the reports that it was, 800 milliseconds between...
It was less than a second.
It was less than a second, yeah. So it was literally a fraction of a second. And man, I am very much torn on this. There's a part of me that feels like, less than a second, like how your brain has to register life and death in that split second. That is something that I personally have never had to deal with, and so it's hard for me to relate. But on the other hand, Joe, I've actually talked about this off screen before, but just sort of the do police need to be held to the highest of standards, and you think they do?
Yeah, I do. I think that as someone who really believes in small government, I think we ought to hold people who are, they work for the government, which means they work for taxpayers, which means they work for the people that they serve. That means they are held to a higher standard. A police officer, I think, is held to a higher standard than someone who works in the private sector because you work for us.